We are at our final session of the pyramid model module training. This is part 3 of the top of the pyramid, and you're going to be joined by Judy again.
Let's look again at our 5 steps of implementing positive behavior supports. Step 1, establishing a collaborative team and identifying goals. The team should be comprised of those who are significant in the child's life and they know the child. And the goal should be a measurable, obtainable goal. So for example, if we have a child who's tantruming 3 times a day and it's very intense, we might make the goal that the child only tantrums twice a day and the intensity is lowered. Gathering information for a functional assessment. So we're going to gather information through observations and discussions with folks that know that child well, such as the family. We'll do an ABC analysis, antecedent, behavior, consequence. What's the antecedent? What's happening before the behavior? What are some possible triggers for that behavior? Does it always happen before lunch? Does it always happen when the child is in a crowded situation? So what's a possible trigger? And then what's the exact behavior defined? So we don't want to use terms like he's verbally aggressive or he's physically aggressive. We want to define exactly what the behavior is. And then the consequence. What is the consequence for the behavior? Is the child getting attention? Is the child socially isolating themselves? What's happening after the behavior? Step 3, developing a hypothesis. So with all this information, why do you think this behavior is occurring? What would be your best guess? Step 4, designing behavior support plans. So you would design a plan that each of the staff can review, and possibly the family too, to follow at home to try to decrease that behavior. Step 5 is implementing the plan, monitoring it, evaluating outcomes, and this is where data comes in. You're going to want to keep some good data to make decisions, and refining the plan in natural environments. So this is a 5-step process, and every step is very important. So we want to make sure that we engage in the process so it helps us understand the behavior. The collection of data, observations, and information to develop a clear understanding of the relationship of events and circumstances that trigger and maintain the problem behavior is the process called the functional behavior assessment.
So in our last session, we talked about the old way of responding to challenging behavior with interventions for all behavior challenges, reactive interventions, the focus on behavior reduction, and the quick fix. So dealing with things as they occur. And then the new way with the pyramid model framework. The intervention is matched to the purpose of the behavior. It's proactive and preventative. It focuses on teaching new skills and their long-term interventions, teaching children lifelong skills for success. So the challenging behavior is always a communication. It's a message when a child does not have language, is used instead of language by a child who has limited social skills or who has learned that challenging behavior will result in meeting his or her needs. And challenging behavior can be an expression of emotion. Challenging behavior has purpose. Children engage in challenging behavior because it works for them. Challenging behavior results in the child gaining access to something or someone, obtaining a request, or avoiding something or someone, escaping or protest. And challenging behavior demonstrates a child's current social emotional skill level. So remember that we're gathering information. As Judy talked about, a functional assessment is a process for developing an understanding of challenging behavior, and in particular, how the behavior is governed by environmental events. And it results in identifying the purpose or function of the challenging behavior. And remember the iceberg model. We see the behavior, but the function is all of the things we don't see. And that's what we're trying to figure out. One of the tools we use for data collection as part of pyramid model program-wide implementation is the BIR. The Behavior Incident Reporting System collects and analyzes behavior incidents in early childhood settings. The system provides an efficient mechanism for gathering information on elements related to behavior incidents that are used to make decisions about providing supports to teachers and children within the program. In addition, the BIRS includes alerts about potential equity issues by calculating disproportionality related to race, ethnicity, IEP status, gender, and dual language learners. The BIRS also provides information on the frequency of behavior incidents resulting in suspensions and expulsions. The goal of the BIRS is to support the child, family, and teacher and consider the actions needed for program improvement. The BIR system focuses on behaviors that are of concern to the teacher and includes fields for the kinds of challenging behaviors that often occur in the preschool classroom and the responses to behavior that are likely to be used by the early childhood educator. The BIR looks at the problem behavior, during which activity did the behavior occur, who was involved, possible motivation, and what was the response to the behavior. So for instance, all of the behaviors that Judy talked about are included as possibilities, and this is a quick checklist that should take teachers no more than 1 to 2 minutes to fill out. Was the child exhibiting disruptions or tantrums or running away, or was there social withdrawal and isolation? Those are just some of the behaviors that are on the checklist. What activity would include arrival, small group activities, centers, indoor play, outdoor play, transitions, cleanup? Those are just some examples. Who was involved? Were there assistant teachers, head teachers, peers, any family members or classroom volunteers present? And there are others listed as well. What might be a possible motivation? Obtain a desired item or a desired activity, gain a peer attention, avoid peers, gain adult attention or comfort, avoid adults, avoid a task, obtain sensory, avoid sensory, or was it possibly another motivation? And then what were the responses of the adults involved? So the checklist really gives a lot of information for the teacher and the classroom and the program. So the BIR really gives us guidance around where to start the functional behavior assessment. The BIR helps us to begin to think about the possible function of the behavior, what's going on below the water. There are many resources and webinars regarding the behavioral incident reporting system on challengingbehavior.org. But before we go any deeper into this process, let's think about how we observe. Watch the video on the next slide, and I'll join you after you view it.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris.
So now that you've seen that video, it gives us a little perspective on some of the things we miss during our observations. I remember the first time I saw that video, I could not believe that there actually was a gorilla that walked across the screen and I somehow missed it. So think of all the things we miss during the day because our focus is somewhere else. When we're collecting data, we want to be as objective as possible. So let's talk about collecting our data using an ABC format. There is this second foundational piece that's important to understand when addressing challenging behavior. So there are 3 segments to the behavioral sequence. There's the setting or the situation, which is frequently called the antecedent. That's the A. And then there's the behavior itself, that's the B. And then the maintaining consequence, that's the C. You've probably heard of and used the ABC method before, but we're going to talk a little bit more about it, and you'll see some examples of observation cards on this slide. You can really use any observation card you like. There are several on challengingbehavior.org, but these are just some simple formats so you can see, and there are observations for the classroom and for home. And the one on the right for Brendan is a home observation card. And you're really just doing your best guess for the possible function. So when we're looking at this setting or situation, it's what happens immediately before the behavior. And then when we're going to put what the challenging behavior is, just be very objective in your writing. What is the exact thing that you're seeing? And we talked about those earlier in the module training, and also using the BIR checklist that gives you possible behaviors you would be seeing. So the behavior, remember, it's used to meet a need and communicate a message, but we have to figure out what it is. And then what happens immediately after the behavior? And that's the whatever the response is from an adult, or maybe another child drops a toy, and that's going to be what happens immediately after. So by understanding the setting and the maintaining consequence, we can start to identify the function of the behavior. So then our next area is going to be trying to figure out replacement strategies and prevention strategies. So if you think about it, we can use the example of adults who love coffee in the morning. I know I do. Many people consume caffeine in the morning to meet a need of obtaining an energy boost. So that's meeting, some of us meet a sensory need, some of us feel good, but let's say it was a need to consume caffeine, and now we were no longer going to be able to have coffee, but there was a replacement, and that replacement was herbal tea. How likely is someone going to want to replace their caffeinated coffee with decaffeinated herbal tea if their need was to get an energy boost? So knowing why people have the behavior they do is going to help get a replacement behavior that's much more likely to be successful. Understanding the challenging behavior is meeting the need for the child, and the behavior is learned, helps adults view children's behavior through this lens of social competence. So now we are going to look at a video of Tim, and then we'll try to figure out the ABCs for what we're watching in the video.
She's scared to get blown out, and the other one's I'm coming.
Our immediate job is always to care for a child and any other children who are affected through an episode of behavior that is causing concern. Our first efforts focus on ensuring that the child is safe. We then attempt to help the child develop increased abilities to cope, and we foster the child's abilities to use more acceptable strategies to experience, express, and regulate emotions, form close and secure interpersonal relationships, and explore the environment and learn. And those are all of the things that we've been discussing so far. Our creativity comes into play when we create a hypothesis or best guess about the meaning of the behavior to the child. We don't always have access to the information about what's going on in a home. However, when we hypothesize about why a child is acting in a way he or she is, in other words, what's the meaning of the behavior, we are using what we know about that child to make a guess about why a child responds or behaves as he or she does. There are many, many variables to consider with regard to each individual child. All of these variables might influence a child's behavior. All we can do is collect the data, be objective, and then make some informed decisions. We can work to cushion ourselves and the child from negative feelings related to the behavior by establishing the habit of wondering about the meaning of the behavior. The process can help us tap into our creativity by leading us to consider multiple explanations for what might be happening for the child, and as well as leading to multiple strategies for dealing with the behavior. So now you'll be watching a video on the hand model of the brain, and this will help us to understand the 5 behavioral principles.
Hi, I'm Jeanette, and I'm going to teach you what's going on in your brain. And let me tell you something, it's not just going on in your brain, it's going on in all of our brains. Our mom's brains, our dad's brains, our grandparents' brain, our sister, our brother's brains, even my brain. So let's look in our brains, okay? This is our spinal cord. This is the inside of our brain, the lower part, where we carry our feelings. And then this is the higher part, our thinking part of our brain. So let's open our brain and see what's going on inside, okay? So when we open our brain, you can see I have a little animal here. And I like to call my animal my little lion. You can call your animal part of your brain whatever you want. A snaky part, a bear part, whatever your favorite animal is. And in this part of our brain, our animal part, when he gets scared or stressed out or has really, really big feelings, he's going to do one of 3 things. One of the first things he might do, what would an animal do if he gets scared or stressed out? Do you know? He might run away. And there's a second thing that he might do if he gets scared or stressed out. Do you know what that is? He might fight. He might bite, attack. Do people ever do that? I know I do sometimes. Sometimes I yell really loud when I get scared or stressed out. Sometimes that happens to all of us. And there's a third thing that our animal part of our brain does when we get scared or stressed out. Do you know? We freeze. We don't know what to do. We feel helpless, hopeless, and we just stay there. And we have all these big feelings and we don't know what to do. We can't think. That's what happens. Does that ever happen to you? I know sometimes that happens to me. However, because we're not animals, right? This is just an animal part in our brain. There's another part of our brain, and that's our thinking part, our talking part. Hi. That's the part that can tell us what to do to take care of our animal part of our brain. It can say things like I messages. I feel scared. I feel mad. I feel scared. And it can tell us what it's feeling. And the second thing it can do, not only tell us what it's feeling, it can tell us what it needs. It can say, I need affection. And affection is I need a hug. I need a kiss. And we can ask our parent or whoever is taking care of you to get that need met. And your parent or whoever's taking care of you will give that to you. They may not always give you what you want, like an iPod or an iPad, but they'll give you a hug or a kiss. And there's another A, which is a need, that you can ask when you're having a feeling, and that is, I need attention. And attention is I need someone to listen. Just hear me. You may not get what you want, but you'll get your mom or dad or whoever's caring for you. They're listening, ear, and they can hear you. And there's another need, and that is you can say, I need alone time, or I need a break. I need to take a walk because I'm having really big feelings. And that's a need too. And you can ask your mom or dad or whoever's caring for you and say, I need a break. I need some alone time. And you can go do that. And that's the third A. And there's another A, and that is, I need appreciation. And do you know what appreciation is? It's somebody telling you you're doing a good job. And we all need that. I know sometimes I need that too. When we can name it, we can tame our animal part and give it love, safety, and feel secure. And we can all do it, and I do it, and I know you can do it. So good luck, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Have you ever wondered why a child continues to use a challenging behavior? Have you ever thought to yourself, why does she keep doing that? It's obvious other children don't like it and don't want to play with her. I don't like it, and she knows that as well. So why does she keep doing it? The answers to those questions are found in something called behavioral principles. And we're also going to be talking about the behavioral sequence in the next slide as it applies to the video you saw of Tim. So you can think about Tim while we're going through this slide, and then you'll see a sequence of behavior in the next slide pertaining to the incident you saw. And by the way, that was an iguana in that video, and that iguana was one of 2 new iguanas in the classroom, and they were very popular, and there had been a problem all day with those iguanas. So that might help you to understand that video. So what are we looking at for the 5 behavioral principles? The first, all behavior is used to meet a need for that person. Whether the behavior is an accepted behavior or a challenging behavior, this principle still applies. For example, the need to obtain a toy from a peer is a common need in early childhood classrooms. One child will meet that need by asking the peer who is using it for a turn. May I please have a turn? Another child will meet that need by hitting the peer who has the toy and scooping it up as she drops it. Even though hitting is an inappropriate behavior, the child's need for that toy is met. Behavior principle 2, the same behavior can meet different needs. Let's take the example we just used. During center time, hitting was used to get the toy. The child also hits during circle. When she hits during circle, she's removed from circle and sits alone at a table. She uses the same behavior for different purposes. The second time she used hitting to meet the need of avoidance, specifically avoiding participating in circle time. Principle 3. Behavior is learned and can be replaced by a new behavior that meets the same need. At some point, the child learned that if she wants something someone else has, she can get it by hitting. And a positive way to think that because she learned that behavior, she can learn a replacement behavior. For example, she could learn to hold out her hand and point to the toy that she would like, or she could learn to ask a teacher for help. This is when you need to think about individualized plans, depending if the child is verbal or nonverbal. Behavioral principle 4. When you understand the need the person is meeting through their behavior, you also understand that they're trying to communicate. In the hitting example, the child is communicating 2 different messages. During play, she's communicating, I want the toy. And during circle time, she's communicating, I want to leave. There are 4 possible needs. Escape or avoidance. The individual behaves in order to get out of doing something he or she does not want to do. Attention seeking. The individual behaves to get focused attention from parents, teachers, siblings, peers, or other people that are around them. Seeking access to materials. The individual behaves in order to get a preferred item or participate in an enjoyable activity. And the 4th one is sensory stimulation. The individual behaves in a specific way because it feels good to them. In our example that we've used throughout the slide, there were 2 needs highlighted. One was to gain access to materials, the toy, and the other was to escape or avoid circle time. It's important to remember that every behavior is a form of communication, even though sometimes it feels like it's happening for no reason at all. There is always a reason. So on our next slide, we'll see a behavioral sequence that talks about the video you saw with Tim.
Now let's look at this example following the sequence. What purpose do you think the child's behavior is meeting? Keep in mind the 4 needs a challenging behavior can meet: escape or avoidance, attention seeking, seeking access to materials, or sensory stimulation. We're looking at what's happening before the behavior, the actual specific behavior, and what's reinforcing that behavior. So the children are playing with a new toy. The child begins to make growling noises at peers and starts hitting his peers. What happens? The other child drops the toy. And now the child that is growling and hitting other children can play with that toy. That's a maintaining consequence. He got what he desired, a toy in the classroom. We do this because we want to look at if we could manipulate any one of these situations to teach the child a behavior to replace the behavior that he's currently exhibiting. We also look at the environment. Do we have enough toys? When we introduce a new toy, do we have enough for all the kids to play with? Do we need to build on that child's communication skills? And how is the behavior being reinforced? Do we need to provide a more positive reinforcement?
We collected the data on Tim, and a good rule of thumb is to do observations for a 2-week period. That way you can see that it's happening on Mondays and Tuesdays and not the rest of the week. So maybe it's something to do with sleep over the weekend. Or you can see that it always happens during arrival or right before PM circle. So this gives you really good information, and you can look at this and see that the behaviors of hitting are happening outside and during small group.
What do you think that behavior was telling us? Behavior typically serves to obtain, avoid, or serve a sensory need. What triggers do you think are happening in the classroom to trigger that behavior? It's important to collect data. When the data has been collected for the defined timeline, the team meets to review and analyze the data and develop a hypothesis about the function of the behavior.
Look, I bring you a ladder. Wow! That's a trap. No, it's not a trap. It's called a ladder.
Okay, feel that you're okay. Always not
No, those are tabs. Oh, I need one. No, they are not hats. They're nothing.
Here is what teachers and family came up with after observing Tim for 2 weeks at school and at home. Notice that our observations are the behaviors that we can observe and that we come to conclusions after multiple observations over time. This helps us to avoid jumping to conclusions about what the purpose of Tim's behavior may be, and our conclusion is a result of observable behavior. What can teachers do? Completing a functional behavioral assessment, an FBA, and designing a behavior intervention plan, a BIP. In order to design a plan to change challenging behavior, we engage in a process that helps to understand the behavior. With that understanding, make the best match between what we want to teach as a replacement behavior and the behavior the child is currently using. When developing an approach to supporting and guiding young children's behavior, it is critical that young children feel safe and secure and are in caring relationships. Very young children need responsive interactions and opportunities to spend time socially and emotionally in supportive environments. The importance of caregivers and families meeting these needs has been discussed in previous modules. So, our approach to responding to challenging behavior is one that is reflective rather than reactive. Reflecting on what an experience is like for a young child, observing what a child is communicating through their behavior, and deciding what we would like the child to do establishes a process that meets a young child's emotional needs and helps support and teach new skills and behaviors. The focus of this approach is on assisting the child in getting his or her needs met rather than eliminating the challenging behavior. The goal is to assist the child with developmentally appropriate self-regulation so that the developmental momentum that the child has is not slowed down or disrupted.
Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for Young Children, or PTRYC, is what we use to provide this individualized support. We think that the child benefits from individualized social emotional supports in the program in collaboration with the family. And we have a resource to share with families that I've included in your resource file. So PTRYC allows us to better understand exactly how the child is communicating their needs and what is challenging for that child and how might we help the child going forward. So after completing the first steps in the PTRYC, the child has an intervention plan that provides guidance for teachers and families about strategies that'll be used to prevent challenging behavior. New skills will be taught and skills will be reinforced. And the goal of PTRYC is to provide more support for the child so they can be successful at school. PTRYC is a team-based model of individualized behavior supports. The team is made up of the family, teachers, and anyone else who's supporting the child, such as occupational therapists, speech pathologists, and you've heard quite a bit about the team. The team will collaboratively go through all of the steps to end up with the plan to support the child's social emotional competence, and this is what PTRYC is all about, and you're going to hear much more about this as part of program-wide implementation.
On this slide, you see the competing behavior equation. Although we want children to meet our expectations, things like sitting in a circle and participating in activity with their peers, we need to meet children where they are developmentally. This may mean that our expectations may compete with the child's needs or wants. What we don't want to do is accept their challenging behavior or reinforce the challenging behavior. Initially, we may teach a child a way to signal using appropriate behavior that he or she wants to leave an activity. While we do that, we're also using the prevention strategies to make the activity more meaningful, and we'll be teaching the child skills to increase his or her engagement and attention. This reflective approach will involve watching children. Careful observations are critical. Previous modules discussed the importance of the strategy of careful observation. Remembering that behavior is a form of communication. Children tell us their needs and wants, and sometimes it's through challenging behavior. Also, a focus on the child. Ask, what is the child trying to tell me? And then begin to formulate your ideas about what the behavior means. Think of it as, and I wonder if, and then create a best guess. What's your hypothesis? And then choose supportive ways to respond.
One idea is preventing the behavior by making it irrelevant. So what can be done to make challenging behavior inefficient, ineffective, and irrelevant? We need to remember that the challenging behavior has been working for the child. They're trying to communicate something. So can we think of a strategy that fulfills their need without having them to exhibit the challenging behavior? So if Brendan is having a really hard time waiting for his turn and he's hitting the child who is at the computer, how about we make a picture card with Brendan's photo on it and we include a timer? And that might be what it takes for Brendan to be able to wait his turn. So what are the child's strengths? Are there peers with whom this child works well? How can that information be used to build a prevention strategy? Is there an activity this child enjoys that would lend itself to trying a new skill with a better chance for success? So we can ask ourselves, how can I build on what is working for the child? Tip 1, get the child's attention. Tip 2, use behavior-specific language. Tip 3, keep it simple. Avoid combining encouragement with criticism. Tip 4, encourage with enthusiasm. Tip 5, double the impact with physical warmth. And tip 6, positive comments should be used, and encourage the child in front of other children. Remember when Dr. Rosemarie Allen was talking about how all of the children hear what we say and how we treat other children, and they learn from that. So we want to model the caring, warm, enthusiastic, positive feedback that will help all children. We need to remember to tell the child what to do instead of what not to do. Clearly and simply state what we expect the child to do. Remember how small they are. Have age-appropriate expectations and use age-appropriate language. Young children have difficulty with contractions, 2 words that are combined, such as don't and can't. Be very clear when speaking to the child. The replacement behavior should be specific and observable. We want to make sure that we can collect data that our prevention strategies are working. We want the replacement behaviors to be helpful to the child's communication with each other and build relationships and enhance classroom participation. We are here to help the child be successful and feel competent. And we need to be realistic that the goal should be accomplished in 2 months. We're not going to see results in 1 or 2 days. Maybe we will, but we can't expect to. And then we always go back to Tier 1 and Tier 2. What works? What are the 5 classroom-wide practices that always work? Remember the deposits. 5-to-1 ratio of positive attention. 2, use predictable routines. 3, establish routines within routines. 4, directly teach behavior expectations. And 5, directly teach peer-related social skills.
What are some of your ideas about Tim's behavior? Remember, this is a no judgment zone and we don't know exactly what will work. We'll look at more idea generators on the next slide. Self-regulation develops along a continuum from external regulation, having someone help you, to self-regulation, being able to regulate your behavior on your own. Preschool-age children are developing their ability to self-regulate. They continue to need many supports to calm themselves when they become upset. This is called co-regulation. They're getting the support they need to learn how to regulate themselves and become independent with this skill. Think about when teachable moments happen. You want to teach the child the new skills when they're engaged and not feeling frustrated and angry. You can support them by reminding them about the new skills that they're learning before anticipated situations, which are typically challenging for the child. Scripted stories for social situations, and you will have access to a tip sheet. Scripted stories provide a script for the child about social situations and expectations. The story is written from a child's perspective and includes descriptive perspective and directive sentences. Scripted stories are also known in the literature as social stories. Carol Gray developed her concept of social stories in 1990, primarily for children with autism. If you go to carolgraysocialstories.com, you can get a free membership to Carol's Club for informative articles and examples of social stories. When I was a pre-K teacher, I used social stories often for many children, not just those with a diagnosis of autism. The story is also written in a way that matches the child's symbolic and receptive communication level. A scripted story can prevent challenging behavior by helping the child anticipate the routine and understand the steps and the expectations of the routine. Each chapter of the scripted story was taught independently of the other, and the teacher only moved on to the next chapter once Tim had some maintenance of the skills in the chapter being taught. Self-management is a method of helping children monitor their own behaviors. In order to do this, identify a behavior that the child will self-manage. Visually display those behaviors for the child in pictures or in posters. Provide instructions to the child on the targeted skill and give the child a mechanism to monitor the skill, something like a checklist or a chart. We've seen videos of Tim using challenging behavior to get toys or initiate social interactions in this and in the previous module. Tim's behavior support plan included the use of social skills training and a self-management system. You should make sure that when the child uses the replacement skill, there is consistent positive feedback. It's really important to remember to teach the replacement skill throughout the day, but not when the child is having the challenging behavior. This is the same idea that you saw here to help Tim. Photographs, drawings, either are fine. Use whatever works best for you and the child. Scripted stories also support the adult in responding to the behavior in new ways, and they give the adult a tool to use for redirection or prompting the desired response. It's important to provide positive attention to the child for engaging in the behavior and using the self-monitoring system. Self-management is a strategy that may be used with children older than 3 who have more advanced language and cognitive skills. Cue cards can be used to prompt the child to remember and to use the replacement skill instead of the challenging behavior. When a child uses the replacement skill, be sure to give consistent and positive feedback. Remember, you should teach the replacement skill throughout the day. Think to yourself, if we can't let children use challenging behavior to express their needs, how can they express themselves in ways that are appropriate? Keep in mind that the new skill must replace the challenging behavior and act as an alternative behavior to the behavior that's challenging. The new skill needs to be efficient and effective. When you're considering a replacement behavior, keep in mind the skills that the child already has that could serve as the replacement behavior. Remember that you don't want to reinforce challenging behavior, and you should respond in a way that makes the behavior ineffective. Also, keep in mind that the rewards for the appropriate behavior need to be at least as rewarding to the child, if not more rewarding, than the rewards for the challenging behavior. Demonstrating self-management skills may result in an award, something like an activity or a certificate, but must not be used to take rewards or privileges away. This example of a self-monitoring chart was laminated. The chart included a rectangular pocket with a dry erase marker inside the pocket, and as the child finished, he was able to check off the steps. Keeping it simple will allow the continued monitoring. Make sure data collection is simple for home and classroom, and find out what's best for families for meeting times and frequency. Offer different options. Can families and other specialists meet virtually if needed? As you already know, it's important to collect data and use observations to understand the meaning of behavior. Early care and education programs, including those that are home-based, should have a process in place to gather ongoing observation and documentation of progress for each child in care on a regular basis. This may consist of short anecdotal notes, results of screening measures, information from parents, videos of the child with adults and peers at different times of the day. Observations can be used regularly by staff in group care and by home visitors in consultation with their supervisor as part of the staff member's ongoing professional development and supervision. This regularly scheduled time for reflection on the meaning of children's behavior can be used to initiate inquiries into the behavior of a specific child who's exhibiting extreme or confusing behavior. In the case of a child with challenging behavior, additional observations will be required to collect detailed information. Remember, observation should be initiated quickly so that the child doesn't have to wait for help. Observations should be conducted by more than one person and may include any people who interact with the child. It also may be helpful to have an observation done by someone who doesn't typically interact with the child but has strong observation skills. It may also be useful for the care provider to do the observation side by side with a director, a more experienced caregiver, or a mental health consultant or resource and referral agency. Observation should be done at various times of the day and across multiple days. They should focus on how the child functions in a variety of activities during the day with a variety of people. All documentation should be recorded in a similar way so the information from multiple sources can easily be compared and analyzed. It's very important to document observable behaviors to help you form your hypothesis about the function of the child's behavior. What can teachers do to support children to learn these skills? Teachers play a critical role in the growth and development of children's knowledge and skills. Teachers need to know effective teaching practices for teaching social and emotional skills. The Teaching Pyramid Practice Rubric was designed to identify those teaching practices and guide the implementation of the pyramid model in the classrooms. On this slide is an example of what should be done and what is not an effective practice. On this slide, there is a review of what we've talked about at Tier 3. Take a few minutes now if you have any last questions or need any clarification. This process took time and consistency. Tim's challenging behavior continued to decline and the team continued to meet. Here's Tim demonstrating how to read a book together and have a lot of fun. He was able to build those skills to form relationships that became friendships. That's what the pyramid model is all about.
But then you need to put it where it goes, okay? This is called the center. It goes into there, goes into that, and it goes into that. Yeah, it's called. It's a profiler. What's these?
Wow.
Look, this profiler doesn't have a master drive in.
In this module, you've learned about the third tier of the pyramid model, Individualized Intensive Behavior Interventions. At this tier, adults use a process called a Functional Behavioral Assessment, or FBA, to design a behavior intervention plan, a BIP, to address children's challenging behaviors. Keys to designing a successful plan include understanding the behavioral principles and the behavioral sequence. The Teaching Pyramid Practice Rubric has 3 dimensions at this tier: assessment, planning, and intervention. These dimensions are supported through team meetings and inclusion of families along every step of the process.
Hi again. The major messages of the pyramid model are a focus on prevention and teaching appropriate skills. Promoting social emotional development is not easy, and there are no quick fixes to challenging behavior. We need to take a comprehensive approach that includes building relationships, evaluating our own classrooms, and spending quite a bit of time reflecting on our own practices and behaviors, and teaching those social skills that children need to be successful. So we want to thank you so much for joining us for this Connecticut Pyramid Module training. We know that the pyramid model is a framework to promote young children's social and emotional development and to prevent and address challenging behavior. And we in Connecticut, we are a state that supports the social emotional well-being of all young children and their families. We're so glad that you had the opportunity to hear from so many of our pyramid partners. We in Connecticut are committed to our mission to build a statewide system for pyramid model implementation in order to enhance the competencies of those who care for, educate, and support young children and their families. And you're a big part of fulfilling that mission. To receive your 18 hours of OEC credit, please fill out the post-assessment and evaluation in the link provided to you. Make sure to have your Connecticut registry number with you before you fill out the survey. And on behalf of the Connecticut Pyramid Partnership, we want to thank you for all that you do to support children and their families.